Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about the game mode. We're going to use the game mode to set the default pawn class for our game, and eventually we'd like to handle death for the pawns, as well as functionality for starting and ending the game. So let's talk about the game mode class. Now, Unreal Engine has a class called a game mode. The A is there because, of course, this derives from the actor class. Now, a game mode has a parent class called a game mode base, which is a little bit more basic than a game mode. Now, in Unreal Engine, game modes are good for handling the rules of the game. This means they can handle things like the win condition for the game. Now, a game mode is a little bit more specialized and has extra functionality that we don't really need for this game project. It has the concept of match state, which is used in multiplayer matchmaking sessions. So for this reason, we're going to use a game mode base and not a game mode. Now, the process for creating a game mode class is the same as creating any other C++ class, which is why this will be your challenge for this video. Create a new class based on game mode base. We're choosing game mode base because we don't need that extra functionality in the game mode class. Now, call it Toontanks Game Mode or something similar, and once you've finished, create a blueprint based on this class. Now, we have a pawns folder and an actors folder. Go ahead and create a new game mode folder and place the new blueprint in the game mode folder. Go ahead and pause the video and create your new game mode class now. Okay, so I'm back here in the editor and I'm ready to create my game mode. So I'm going to right-click and select New C++ Class from within the Toontanks folder in C++ Classes, and I'm going to scroll down, and I see here that there's Game Mode Base as an option. Now you'll see the pop-up says the Game Mode Base defines the game being played. It governs the game rules, scoring, what actors are allowed to exist in this game type, and who may enter the game. So we're going to be using the game mode to determine our game rules, which will dictate when we can win or lose the game. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to call this game mode Toontanks Game Mode, and click Create Class. Now here's my Toontanks Game Mode. I have a .h and a .cpp, and they look pretty empty, and we're going to change that in the videos to come. But for now, we have our C++ class, and we're ready to create a blueprint based on this. So back here in the editor, I'm going to make my Game Mode folder here in the Blueprints folder. So I'm going to make a new folder called Game Mode, and inside the Game Mode, I'm going to right-click and make a new blueprint class, and here under All Classes, I'm going to search for Toontanks, and here's Toontanks Game Mode. Clicking Select, I now have my blueprint, and I'm going to call this BP_Toontanks Game Mode. So now I have a game mode. So now that we have a game mode, let's go through the steps of setting this to be our game mode for this game. And we can do that by going into Edit and Project Settings, and under Project, we see Maps and Modes. And here, under Default Modes, we see Default Game Mode, and you'll see that it's set to the Game Mode Base class. We can click this dropdown and see that BP Toontanks Game Mode is an option, and we can select that. Now, under Selected Game Mode, we can expand this dropdown, and you'll see that there are a number of properties on the Game Mode class that we can set. We can set them here, but what I'd rather do is set them in the Game Mode blueprint itself. So we can close this. There's no option to save. It's already going to save this for us. So we'll close the project settings and open up BP Toontanks Game Mode. And here in the Details panel, under Classes, we see a number of default classes designated for the game. Now, the one I'm interested in right now is Default Pawn Class. Here we can choose the default pawn that will be possessed when we start the game. So if I click the dropdown, I can see that BP Pawn Tank is an option, and I'm going to select that. So I'm going to compile and save this and close out of it. Now we've set this tank to be possessed using the AutoPossessPlayer variable, and to remind you, I'm going to search for AutoPossessPlayer and see that it's set to player 0 for this tank. So that allowed us to possess this particular pawn without having our custom game mode set specifying the pawn class. So now that we have a game mode, we're going to remove this pawn from the world. So I'm going to hit delete and delete it. Now I'm going to zoom all the way over to this little thing right here and select it. You'll see that this is called a player start. You can see that here in the world outliner. Now, since we have our default pawn class set in our game mode, when the game starts, our pawn will be spawned right here at the player start. Now, if you saw this earlier in the course and maybe decided to remove it, you can always get a new player start by looking over here to the left in the Place Actors panel. You'll see that there are a number of classes we can drag into our world, including player start. Now, we only want a single player start. If we had multiple player starts, then Unreal Engine will be forced to choose one of them at random, but we only have a single player for this game, so we're going to use one player start. So if I go ahead and hit play, we'll see that my pawn is spawned at the location of that player start. Now, I'm moving quite slowly because we're spawning this actor based on the default blueprint, and my movement speed is set in the default blueprint to a low value. So what I'd like to do is change my movement speed. So I'm going to go into the Pawns folder and open BP Pawn Tank and select BP Pawn Tank Self, and here under Speed, I can up this value to, say, 700. And I'm going to put the turn rate at 120. Now if I hit play, I can move around quite a bit faster. I'm going to go ahead and save BP Pawn Tank, close out of it, and now we have our game mode set for the game. So in this video, we created the game mode class for our game, and we set this as the default game mode both in the project settings and in the world outliner to make sure that our particular level is using the correct game mode. We also set the default pawn class in the game mode blueprint, and we used a player start to spawn that default pawn rather than having a pawn already in the world and using auto possess player. In the next video, we're going to add more things to the game mode so that we can start handling gameplay logic related to the rules of the game. I'll see you in the next video.